Hope you're having a great week. I have planted my fall garden. I'm going to try one in the fall. Put in zucchini and squash and a few tomatoes. I'm going to try tomatoes again. They didn't do so well in the heat. But here we go. We'll try a little bit different. A little something to do and have fun and stuff to give away. So we've been talking about, the writer's been writing, of Hebrews been writing about Jesus being a greater sacrifice and a greater priest than the old covenant, that the new covenant is superior to the old covenant, and its effectiveness is that it can cleanse more than just our external behaviors, that it can actually purify our souls. And now he's going to talk about the worship of Christ in the heavens, which is quite a fascinating idea and reality for us. There is our experience for me right now here at Wesley. We have our Sunday morning worship experience in a beautiful church, and we worship Christ. But he says that this is a copy of the heavenly sanctuary, and he uses another term that he uses. This is a shadow of the reality that exists in heaven, where Jesus serves as your high priest and also as your sacrifice. And so he says this in Hebrews chapter 9, verse 15. And then I'm just going to talk to you a little bit about what else he says in this chapter. For this reason, Christ is the mediator of a new covenant, that those who are called may receive the promised eternal inheritance, now that he has died as a ransom to set them free from the sins committed under the first covenant. And so the writer uses the word ransom, that he pays, like we've been kidnapped, and he pays the ransom to get us back. Like Satan kidnapped us for a period of time in our life, and Jesus paid what was required so that we could come back home. And I just love that image of my Lord being like that in our lives. I haven't often thought about Satan kidnapping me, but I understand it, and you probably do too in your own life, and you can probably see it in the lives of other people, where we are on the wrong side. Our souls, our thoughts, our attitudes, and even our behaviors have been kidnapped, and we become active in behavior and attitude in ways that are not really the way that we were made to behave. And so Jesus pays the price to get us back so that he can be our priest and our sacrifice. He goes on to explain a couple of things that are important. First, he talks about a will. I have a will, Brenda has a will, and we have heirs to the will. Now, the heirs cannot get their inheritance if I'm still alive. They would have to do me in to get the inheritance, and if they do that, then they probably won't get the inheritance either. No, I would have to die for them to receive the inheritance as an heir for my will. And he says that that this is pretty similar to that. That this is pretty similar, that we are heirs of God's will in our lives. We are heirs of heaven. We're going to inherit heaven, but we cannot inherit it unless the one who has made us an heir dies. And that's how he talks about Jesus' death on the cross, that he had to die so that we could inherit our place in heaven, as if we are the children of God. And we are. And he goes on in this chapter to explain that those who believe in Jesus become the children of God and therefore become heirs of heaven and of the inheritance that God has entrusted over to us through the death of Christ. We don't have to wait until our death to inherit eternal life. When we accept Jesus, he's already died. And so we become heirs then. And so we begin to live out our lives in the family of Christ. And so he explains something that's pretty important. He talks about, they call it shadow worship, which is the worship that we experience here in this world. And in the Old Covenant, there was this practice where from the very first time that they set up the tabernacle, they would kill a heifer, and they had a branch called hyssop, and they would dip it in the blood, and they would go like this and sprinkle it all around the sanctuary, around the whole place where they were, the tabernacle where they were meeting. They would sprinkle it because God told them that it is by the blood that your holy place will be purified. And there was a part of the ceremony where he would dip the hyssop in the blood, and there would be like an aisle down the center and people on both sides, and he would sprinkle the people, symbolizing their forgiveness of sins. And he says that that was more than symbolic, that was necessary. It wasn't just a symbolic act. And then he likens that to the death of Christ and his blood spilled upon the cross, and said that it is by this blood that the heirs are purified, and that the worship in the heavens, that the blood of Christ is used in the heavens as purification for the heavenly sanctuary, which is a great, great concept. And I'm just going to read you one verse about this. The whole chapter is about this, and it's really fascinating to read. It was necessary then for the copies of the heavenly things to be purified with these sacrifices, but the heavenly things themselves with better sacrifices than these. And so the copies, where Moses was in the desert in the tabernacle, they had to be purified with the blood of goats and bulls. And how much more the heavenly worship, the sanctuary in the heavens, the reality of our worship, must be purified, but by a better blood than the blood of goats and bulls, and that would be the blood of Christ. And I've always been fascinated with heavenly worship and who's there and kind of what's going on and what's going to be my role, and I've learned a lot over the years. Sometimes it just comes to me as I'm reading, and sometimes it comes to me as I'm just sitting there meditating and thinking. But a few things that we in the heavens we get to do. We join together with the angels. That's pretty cool. I don't become an angel because I'm a human, and God made me human. God made angels. Angels, they're different, but we worship together. And our acts of worship are actually pretty cool. We all get to sing. Angels get to play some instruments. And it may be that we get to play some instruments too. Those of us who know how, like that matters. And then what happens is, like every time I pray now, my prayer, the Bible tells us my prayer gets saved. And like Jesus saves my prayer for heavenly worship, and it becomes incense. My prayer, the prayers become the incense of the worship service, and so it is a fragrant aroma. My prayer is like a sacrifice. Every gift that I give gets saved. Like my genuine generosity gifts, they get saved, and they become a part of this heavenly worship experience. My acts of service get saved as part of this heavenly worship experience. And so the basic premise is the things that in my life that are genuine faithful acts, they get saved. And not just for me, but for you and for everybody who's being faithful, you know. It's an awesome thing to realize that I am having an effect now on worship in the heavens. I hope that I have an effect upon the worship of the people who are here and I can transmit God's truth to them. But it's pretty glorious to know that I have an impact on heavenly worship. I am participating. I'm there, but also all of my history is there. One of the greatest acts of worship, I'm sure, is going to be when you and I, when we get to lay down our crowns. And as an act of worship, that's what it says. As an act of worship, we lay down our crowns, and we think it's symbolic a lot of times, but there's a very great reality to it, because our crowns are not I gave XYZ money, or I prayed for so and so, or I'm no, those are already saved. Crowns are specific, and the crowns are, if I have in my life represented Jesus in such a way that another soul has been impacted and grown in faith, or even started their faith journey, then my relationship with them, whether that be my children, people in my church, new friends that I meet, neighbors that I move in with, or their children, or anyone that I might have impacted for the glory of the kingdom of God, that person becomes my crown. You know, and I have a responsibility to my wife. I pray that she would be one of the crowns that I get to lay down. My children, I pray that I would get to lay down that crown for them. My grandchildren, of course, but now I pray for my neighbors and for their children, and I pray for some of you, and I pray for some people I haven't met yet. I want to meet them, that they might become my joy and my crown. And that is a powerful act of worship as we kneel down and lay our crowns at the feet of Christ. And so there are a great many things that happen in the heavens, most of which we don't really understand. You know, it's pretty clear that, like Ezekiel and Isaiah, Daniel, they saw these things. They saw it happening, and so they try to explain it to us, and that's where we get a lot of the images that this writer's talking about, that there is a heavenly worship that is taking place. And so I wanted to just share that with you. And one last thought on this heavenly worship and the importance of the blood of Christ. In the Old Testament, their high worship experience, their Passover experience, was once a year, and it was repeated every single year. And so it was necessary to do that because the blood of the bull and the goat was ineffective. And so it didn't really accomplish in total what was needed. But the blood of Christ is effective, and it accomplishes transformation of behavior, but also transformation of soul. And as a result of its effectiveness, the blood only has to be shed one time. And this writer will use this phrase many, many times in the next couple of chapters. Once and for all. Effective once and for all. And so we can be thankful that Jesus's blood is effective for my transformation in my soul. We're going to spend the next whole chapter is about shadow and reality, and I have spent some time thinking about that, and it is very, very powerful when you start thinking that the world that we live in, even though it's physical, flesh and blood, is considered a shadow of reality. And I look forward to sharing that with you next week. For right now, be thankful that Jesus' blood is effective once and for all, and that there is a real worship service in the heavens that includes all the things of my life of faith that have been saved. I pray God's richest blessing on you, and you have a great week, and I'll see you next week. Here it's nice and cool. It's October. Great time to be in Florida until about 3 o'clock this afternoon when it's 90 degrees again. But it is good to be with you. Have a great week.